Welcome to the Wells Springs Unified Union School District annual meeting. I'm Kimberly Bushnell. I'm the moderator. I'm going to go through and read the warning, and then we will discuss Articles 1 through 6. But wait, I had some notes. I have said everything I was going to say, although do you want to make your motion about non-voter speaking people?
Yeah. I will move that Superintendent Pullinan, Business Manager Malazzo, Principal Colte, and Principal Beal be allowed to speak and ask questions for the board as not being residents of Wells or Middletown.
Yeah, that's fine.
That all?
Kimberly, our assistant.
And Kimberly Stedman, the assistant. Special ed is what I call it. It has a fancy name.
Student Support Services.
Student Support Services, Assistant Director.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ann.
All right. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Right. So here's the warning. The legal voters of the Wells Spring Unified Union School District, consisting of the towns of Middletown Springs and Wells, are hereby notified and warned to meet at the Wells Village School in said town at 7 o'clock in the evening on Wednesday, February 26th, 2020, to transact any of the following business, Articles 1 through 6, not involving voting by Australian ballot. Upon the conclusion of the business not involving Australian ballot, the meeting is to be adjourned and reconvened at the respective polling places hereinafter named on Tuesday, March 3rd, 2020, from 7 a.m. until 7 p.m. in Middletown Springs, and from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. in Wells, at which time the polls will close, to transact any business involving voting by Australian ballot, which are Articles 7 through 8. So, Article 1 is to elect a moderator for a term of 1 year. Do I hear any nominations for moderator?
I'd like to nominate Kimberly Bushnell.
Wait, I need a second, right?
I'll second that.
Laura. Second.
Made the motion, I'm sorry.
Laura? Any other nominations? I do. I think I actually, do one of these work?
Yeah.
Okay. Good question. All right, do you hear me now? Oh, okay, I didn't realize. All right. Yeah, is that better? Yes. Okay. I think I was nominated, and I'm looking to see if there's anyone else who would like to be nominated. All right, hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Article 2, to hear the reports of the school board and the other district officials and act thereon.
I will move that we accept the reports as printed in the annual report.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? Yes.
Question, in the report you have what the Middletown Springs School and the Wells School have done for maintenance. I'm also a member of the Woodman, and we received a letter for a permit applied for the Wells School for upgrading their wastewater, but in your report it does not mention anything about upgrading the wastewater for this school. And to my knowledge, it has not failed So I was wondering if anybody could answer that.
You want
I
to?
think I can, yeah. So this is not on.
It is, if
It
you're
is.
close.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. So this is part of the ongoing process of the land transfer that went back to the merger. And it probably isn't in here because in early January, we were basically kind of stuck. We need to have a portion of the land deeded over to, I'm going to get a little mixed up here, I don't have my papers in front of me, but a portion of the land needs to be deeded over to, I think it is MWA, but it could be to the school. But anyway, there's also a well involved, and that meant we had to get a permit from the state of Vermont. Last year, Jack Facey, who's part of the legal team that has been working on all this, they applied for a permit from the state of Vermont regarding the well because it's not in the right place and you have to test the water. And that application went in April, and it basically was stuck until I came on board in September. I called and they said, we haven't gotten any response, we should have known in May, and it went on and on. So finally, I wrote them a letter and said, listen, this was supposed to be done by July 1 of 2018. And so we got the permit, and the permit, I guess, is just to test the water to make sure it's okay, and then we'll be able to move forward. But there's no that we're going to do this. This is just what the state of Vermont made us do. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. What? No, that's it. Right. So hopefully by the end of the year, we will have this completed. That is my goal.
Great. Are there other questions on the report? I do see we'll talk about the budget in detail, but is there other questions at this point? Yes. Oh, wait, I'm sorry, but I forgot to say in the beginning that when you have a question, state your name so we know who's talking, and probably all of you should have introduced yourselves. I'm sorry.
That's true.
So I'm going to make them introduce, and then we'll go back to you.
Louis Malazzo, I'm the business manager for Greater Rutland County Supervisor Union.
Meredith Morgan, Middletown Springs Board Member.
Laura Birch, Wells Springs, Wells, Vermont, board member.
Judy Pullinen, Superintendent.
Clarence Haynes, Middletown Board Member and Chair of the Wells Springs Unified Union District Board.
George Gonda, Middletown Springs Board Member.
Eric Mopryan, Wells Village Board Member.
Courtney Bishop, Wells, board member.
Nora Sargent, clerk.
All right, now it's your turn.
And my name is Sherry Harrison, and I'm a Wells resident. And I have a concern about the commingling of the ballots at town meeting. I brought this up 2 years ago at the meeting here, and I noticed that the minutes of that meeting says the board will look into the commingling of ballots. Because to me, it seems utter nonsense to ask somebody to go from Middletown to Wells or Wells to Middletown or whichever way in March when we could have a blizzard, an ice storm, who knows what. When all you have to do is count the ballots in your own community and phone in the results. We were told at the time that it somehow promoted unity, which sounded to me like an asinine concept, because all it does is hide the regional results, and the regional results aren't that important anyway, because the numbers are all added up. So I'm wondering if this was indeed addressed 2 years ago as it was supposed to be. I sort of doubt it, because I don't see how anybody could possibly vote to continue it if they actually discussed it and thought about the ramifications. You don't want somebody to get killed transporting ballots, for heaven's sakes, when all you have to do is pick up a phone. So I'm wondering what's happening, and if and when the change is going to be made.
I will try to address that. I don't recall what the discussion was after the meeting. I do know that when the articles of agreement that were put forward to approve the union that was one of the articles that said the ballots would be commingled and counted when the Union District was formed. I don't recall whether that article was warned at the time or whether that was just adopted with the Articles of Agreement as a whole. It makes a difference if it was voted by the board voted by the town at the time of the merger. Then in order to change that, it would have to be warned and changed at an annual meeting like this. It would have to be done by that vote. If it was just done as an article in the whole, as proposed in the whole thing and not voted on separately on the warning, then the board could address that and present an article to make a change to the Articles of Agreement that could change that function. It would still have to come to a vote of the board, either the vote of the board or a vote of the town at the annual meeting. And I do not know, to answer your question, which way that needs to be done.
We did discuss this at the time. Unfortunately, I don't have that paperwork in front of me, but this issue was raised early, probably 2 years ago, because I wasn't at the Middletown meeting last year. But we were told, somebody thought that it was part of the bylaws, and if memory serves, it turned out it was not part of the bylaws, that it was voted at a regular meeting of the Wells Springs Board, one of the very early meetings, like maybe May or June or shortly after the board was started. So my guess is that if this is correct, and if it's wrong, you can correct me somewhere along the line, but then all you'd have to do is at one of your regular meetings. You wouldn't have to put it before the voters because you didn't before, and you wouldn't have to call a special annual meeting because you didn't before. But I think you could just make a motion to do it, because this is terribly important, because there is a significant safety issue involved, and to me it just sounds like a dumb thing to be doing. I would want to correct it just as soon as possible, and I think it might be easier than you think it would.
Want to speak? Anything else?
No.
Have it noted.
Okay, we've taken a note. Other questions at this point? Yes.
I don't want to take, if somebody else has.
No, you don't have any hands. You go.
Okay, thank you. I also have a concern about these reports not being mailed out as the town reports are. I wonder how many of these got printed up and how many people actually got them when they had to go beg for them at the town office. I did. I put in my begging very early on. I said I want one. But it just seems that a lot of people may not know what's going on because they haven't had the opportunity to get it. And I know that they've been notified that they have to go to the office or the school or the library or online or whatever. But we all know a lot of people don't do that, even if they're told to. If it comes in your mailbox, you're much more likely to look at it. And I'm wondering, since the town reports are all mailed out, and yeah, it costs some money, but in a $5 million budget, that's not cost prohibitive. I'm wondering why they're not sent to everybody. And again, were enough printed up so everybody had them if they wanted
To address the couple parts of the question, to answer your question, the last year's minutes, it was voted that the report be not be mailed to everyone. I don't know the exact wording without looking it up.
that the informational flyers would continue to be mailed and not to mail the school reports.
Yeah, motion was made to continue to mail the informational flyer and to not mail the school report, seconded and passed. So that's what was done last year. If after the motion, after this motion to accept the reports is cleared, and someone wants something done differently this year, the floor is definitely open where someone can make that motion. The other part of it is, you asked how many of these were printed up, and you give me a number, Louis? Do you
There
know?
was 300 printed, which is a fraction of what would need to be printed if they were mailed out. So the increase in cost isn't really mailing them, it's more the production of the actual booklets.
All right, so that, to answer that part, was there any other part of the question?
I think that pretty well takes care of it. So you made the decision at the last meeting that it was better not to print that many and hope that not many people wanted them.
Well, the decision at the last meeting was to continue doing it as they had for the year before. Since the Articles of Agreement in the beginning stipulated that this how it would be done. And last year, the motion was to continue doing it the same way that was passed.
I think Laura has something.
And just as a further comment, every household in the town of Wells and Middletown is mailed a flyer with the information, the basic information. I'm sorry. Hold the feedback.
Come over my way, Laura.
Hold her closer to your mouth.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make that clear, that every household is receiving the informational flyer.
Yep.
And I wanted to add also that we do have it online, and I know for a lot of people, myself included, I love paper, but many, many of our younger residents will go online and look for it. For them, it's a way of life. For us, it's, the old-fashioned booklet, but we are trying to contain costs, but also get the information out.
And we believe that as many people are getting it now as would otherwise, as many people reading, you don't find that this is keeping information from people? I'm just wondering.
No, I don't. I really do believe we've got it. We've got the entire annual booklet online. We put that in several places. We put it in the flyers that go out. We advertise it. We actually have a TV show on PEG TV airing right now with all this information too. So I think if people want to access it, they can. If we run out of booklets, we would order more. But I do think that because it's 2 towns and it is very expensive to publish these, that it's an economical way to have things online, as many things are online now, as well as have the paper copies for those people who choose to have it.
So any other questions or comments before we accept the reports of the school board?
I've got a list of them here. I was concerned about the term professional services over and over and over in the budget. I'm sure it means something totally different each time it's used in different contexts. But if you add them all up, professional services.
If this is excuse me, I'm going to interrupt you. If this is a budget question, I think we have an article later where we'll really get into the money.
Okay, I'll stay out of the budget.
So if you have a question that's not money, we'll take it now.
I'll ask a different one then for now. When I was on the board many, many, many years ago, but anyhow, at that time, there were 2 things that people were most interested in the town report. They wanted to know how many kids were in each grade in the school, and you had done an excellent job covering that. Those charts were very, very good. And they wanted to know the names of all the employees and how much they were making, each one of them. That was very well handled for the supervisory union. You have an excellent chart that covers that. But we don't have it for Wells in Middletown. Would it be possible to include that in the future?
If we could call the question and move forward, I think that there are staff included on the budget.
I think so too.
I mean, I don't think I need the answer to it until.
I don't see,
Clarence,
Claire,
Lewis
Lewis
would
has an answer.
Well, I think it's actually the staff thing. but-
A similar comment has come up in another district as well. And so that there is plans to add that for the local district as well, as far as the name of the staff, but to add their salaries and FTEs. That information was provided in the past, before the merger, and we could, because it was outlined in each budget line, but going forward, we can add that for next year.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Right. Are we ready to vote the acceptance of the report? All in favor?
aye.
You all can say aye too, this is your meeting. So any, wait, all in favor, aye. What's the next part? Any nay? Any noes? Nope, all right, hearing none, motion carried. We're moving on to Article 3, to elect a treasurer for the term of 1 year. Are there any nominations for treasurer?
I'll nominate Tammy Holcomb.
All right, I have a nomination for Tammy Holcomb.
I'll second the nomination.
And a second. Are there any other nominations for treasurer of the Union District? Yes.
They're not here.
She's not here. The one who's been nominated is not here. But she did serve in that capacity for the last 2 years. All right, so any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to Article 4, to elect a clerk for the term of 1 year. I'm going to take nominations.
I'd make a motion to nominate Nora Sargent.
There's a motion to nominate Nora Sargent.
I'll
Do I have a
second the motion.
We have a second from Clarence. Any other nominations? Any comments or questions? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Now, Article 5 is to hear a presentation from the school board on the proposed 2020-2021 budget.
At this point, the business manager and the building principals will take over and do a presentation, and then we'll have a period of time for question and answers afterwards, or after the information is presented.
So, Louis, if you're starting, why don't you take the mic? And we can use the second one if you need it.
There it goes. Okay.
All right. So it looks like some of it's being cut off by that light, but I'll try to.
I could try and move it over too.
Okay, so the first slide is just showing the board goals, and the Wellsprings came up with two main board goals. The first goal being to genuine unification of programs, of schools, and of communities. The board will take an active role in identifying and implementing activities to build community between towns. And then the second bullet, the board will support and oversee the efforts to define where programs can be blended and where individuality can be continued. And then the second board goal, to remain vigilant and informed about state and federal changes. The board will remain vigilant and informed about state and federal changes that may affect our school system, and the board will advocate regularly. So some of the outcomes for the school board. Specific community building activities. The board has a facilities committee. They have a transportation committee, both that meet regularly to work on those items. Annual meeting, a full day pre-K program. They have an in-house food service program in both schools. They have a shared athletic director and athletic programs. They have a choral and instrumental music concerts. And I believe this year they're working on a joint program between both schools. Shared Spanish, music, art, and librarian. Regular staff meetings, field trip to Starbase, and Girls on the Run and Velocity programs. Goal number 2 activities, VSBA meetings, webinars, training and workshops, contacting legislators to advocate for Wellsprings Unified Union School District, school construction aid, dual enrollment, adoption of driver's education policy, and the adoption of school choice policy. So the two schools, Middletown Springs and Wells, merged. This is the second year of the merger. The merger took place on July 1st, 2018. And there was some specific benefits to the school, the towns merging. So some of those benefits are listed here. Both schools were able to keep their small schools grants, where if they didn't merge, they would have lost that. And that's approximately $172,000 a year that they receive from the state. They're able to share staffing and resources, including several teachers, athletic director, building and maintenance items, food service staff, and the list goes on. By sharing the resources and staff, they're able to create more opportunities for students, more options for parents and students. And then the other incentive was a retention of a tax incentive. There was a 4 years worth of tax incentives. The first year was 8 cents. This current year that we're in right now, we received 6 cents. The year that we're budgeting for next year is a 4-cent reduction, and in the fourth year it will be 2 cents. The other item that I'll add to that list that's not on there is also that there was 4 years worth of incentives that no town's tax rate could increase or decrease more than 5%. So it helped make a steady incline or decline based on the two towns merging. There wasn't one big jump in any given year. So both schools have not reached that unified tax rate yet because they're still working on that 5% threshold. And we'll go over that a little bit more when we get to the tax rates. So this slide just shows the proposed budget for FY21. So the expenditure budget that's proposed is $5,098,000. It's a 5.8% increase for $280,000. Education spending, which is total expense, it's the first line, minus any local revenues. So it takes away takes the total expense of $5,098,000 and subtracts the small schools grant, any tuition revenue, any other local grants that they receive, rental income, interest income, all of that income gets deducted, and the amount that we have to raise in property taxes is equal to education spending. Education spending is proposed at $4,896,000, an 11.3% increase over last year. And then education spending per pupil takes education spending and divides it by the number of equalized pupils for the Wellspring School District, and that's proposed at $18,318 for next year, an increase of 12.7%. This slide shows the steps in the calculation of your tax rate. So there's many steps in that process. It all starts off with a proposed expense budget of $5,098,000. We then have to calculate what the education spending is by subtracting the local revenue. And so education spending is at $4,896,000. We then take education spending and we divide it by equalized pupils. Equalized pupils is the number of pupils in both buildings as well as secondary students. It's a 2-year average, and then there's some weighting that's involved in the state's calculation. So we take education spending divided by the equalized pupils of 267 to get spending per pupil equal to $18,318. The next step is to take the property yield that's given to us by the state. At this point, it is just an estimate. This number is decided by the legislators. It's usually not done until later on in the session, usually April, sometimes later. The tax commissioner for the state of Vermont gives us an estimate of what he's proposing on December 1st. His estimate was $10,883. That is an increase over last year of 2.2%. This is the number that we want to see increase. As this number increases, it drives down tax rates. So any increase in this number is a benefit to the taxpayers. So we take your education spending per pupil of $18,000 divided by the property yield of $10,883 to come up with your equalized tax rate, and we get $1.68. We then deduct the 4-cent incentive because of the merger to get a unified tax rate of $1.64. Now earlier I was talking about that other incentive where no district could increase or decrease more than 5%. So Middletown Springs has reached that unified rate of $1.64, so that threshold no longer pertains to them. So we take their $1.64 and we apply the CLA. The CLA is the common level of appraisal. It compares the fair market value of your home to the assessed value of your home. If the CLA is at 100%, that means those two numbers are equal. If that number is below 100, it means the fair market value of your home is more than the assessed value of your home. So as that number decreases below 100, it means the price of your home is increasing. The fair market value of the price of your home is increasing. So right now, homes are worth, as a whole, in Middletown Springs, are worth more than the assessed value. So after we apply that CLA,
There it is.
we have an adjusted tax rate of $1.65 for Middletown, which is a 19.9-cent increase. And then for Wells, Wells has not reached that threshold yet, so they're still not at the unified rate. Their tax rate was lower, and because of the merger, it has been increasing. Not only because of the merger was only a piece of it. The other piece was that Wells did not have full choice for secondary students prior to the merger, and that was added due to the merger. So it gives parents and students more choice to attend any Vermont school, as well as out-of-state schools at the full rate. So their tax rate has been increasing each year until they get to that unified rate. Once we apply the CLA, they're looking at a tax rate of $1.50, a 13.2-cent increase. So this chart shows the trend over the last 4 years of the tax rates for both Middletown and Wells. So the orange line is Wells, and it's showing the steady increase over the last 4 years. And then Middletown Springs did see an initial decrease the first year due to the merger, and the main reason for that was because Wells had a lower tax rate, and when you combine the two, both districts were coming closer together, so Wells was going up and Middletown was coming down. And then over the last 2 years, that has gone up a little bit more slightly the first year, and then more this current year. So some of the reasons for the increase, and a 12.7% increase in education spending is quite a jump. And the main reason for that is that last year, there was $225,000 approximately in surplus funds that were used to lower the tax rate. This year, looking at FY21, those surplus funds are no longer available. So the big problem with having surplus funds is that it's great the year that you apply them, but the next year, you're kind of digging yourself out of the hole because you're starting with that much less in revenue. So that's the big reason why the education spending has increased so much. And then all of the other reasons of why expense has increased. So one thing the board has no control over is secondary tuition. It's up $144,000 for this year. And the main reason for that is because the 7th grade class, or the 6th grade class that's going into 7th grade is a lot larger than the 12th grade class that's graduating. So it's an increase in students just due to a shift. We had a couple, so the 12th grade class is a lot smaller, so the tuition that's going away is a lot less than the tuition that's being added to those new 7th graders.
Must be a loose wire or something.
Some of the other items, increases in health insurance, 12.9%. This is being seen statewide for schools. That's on top of the 11.8% increase we had last year, which is over 25% over 2 years. It's a pretty significant cost increase that needs to be made up elsewhere in the budget, and it becomes difficult. Transportation cost increase, reduction in Medicaid funds, which helps fund some of our ancillary staff, increase in the SU assessment, mostly due to special ed, as well as increases in contractual wages and benefits. Drop in the CLAs, increases budgets, and then we talked about the surplus already. Contractual wages and benefit changes are just inflationary costs that we have to deal with each year. This pie chart just depicts how each of the budget funds are spent, and to show how a majority of budget funds are spent on certain items. So the first big blue block there, it's a little hard to read, but that is wages and benefits. So that's about almost a little over a third of the budget. And then you have tuition costs, which is over another third. And then the smaller pieces of the pie is the rest of the budget. So the green is the SU assessments, which is mostly made up of special ed expense. And then you have repairs and maintenance, I think that says 2%. Transportation, maybe it's a little more, 4% or something, I can't read it.
Transportation is 1, repairs and maintenance is 3, and purchase services is
2%, okay. And then everything else is... There we go.
Thank you, that's good.
So transportation 1%, repairs and maintenance 3, purchase service 2, and then supplies, and all of that, everything else in the budget is 6% of the budget. So the pieces that the board and the administrators have control over, if you take away staffing, is a very small piece of the pie. So I'm going to turn it over to the principals that will talk a little bit about their schools, and then we'll take questions after that.
Just to introduce myself, I'm Elizabeth Colby, I'm the new principal here at Wells Village School. It's a pleasure to service the children in Wells and work with them on the staff. And then this is...
And Rick Field, principal of Middletown Springs, and I'm in my 9th year, so pleasure to be part of this Wellspring Unified District.
So these are some of the things, and this is just a snapshot of what goes on between our two schools and how we're collaborating together. So as an SU, we're all working towards that learner-centered instructional model, meeting children where they're at and continuing to increase their education. We work closely with the Tarrant Institute. We have project-based learning coaches that support our schools, our teachers, and even our children. We're working on personalized learning plans. Something that we use is called Seesaw. Some of us are piloting that. Others are more confident with what's going on. Both schools are PBIS schools, which is Positive Behavior Intervention Systems and Supports. It is how we help continue students to make positive choices and recognize the work that they do. You want to continue?
So I just talk a few minutes about project-based learning, personalized learning with the Tarrant Institute, which is an organization that's really trying to bring relevant learning experience for the students. And some of the work we're doing now is with our 4th through 6th graders, working with a town-owned piece of land, Sullivan Woods, and are working to utilize the area for learning. We have I laugh every time I say it, but the outhouse implementation committee, we're investigating what's going to take to put an outhouse on that piece of land. I have to say the students are totally engaged with it. We never thought an outhouse would bring that much joy to students, but they're very excited and doing the groundworks to communicate with the town selectmen. They're running the meetings. It's really a very exciting thing. And we have other grades doing other things, lean-to, birdhouses, and building bridges. So I think it's a very exciting time for education, project-based and personalized learning. When you have students engaged in their learning, it is very exciting. And some of the other things that are happening, we have what's called Makerspace, which is hands-on learning within the schools. We actually have a printed wood shop off to one of our classrooms. We actually made benches for Sullivan Woods last year. We made cigar box guitars, a lot of different things that are happening that the students are directing and recording and using Seesaw to record their learning in, and very exciting.
Sure. We also, both schools offer summer and extended day programs, and information on summer programming will be coming out shortly as we continue on through the spring. We have a lot of community partners. We have 4 WINs that we've recently started here at Wells. We have access to the Vermont Symphony Orchestra. They've come and performed at our schools. We have wonderful support from the Modern Women Association and the Friends for Education. And the Farm to School is happening in both schools. And we look a lot at our social emotional learning, and we use Second Step and perspective programs, changing perspectives programs, so that we can continue to better our students and help them work through challenges and be human beings as well.
Do you want questions at the end?
Yes, please.
So one thing I'm really excited about the social emotional is that at Middletown Springs we have what's called cauldrons, and this is the second year we've had them, where we have students by mixed grades, and they meet with one person for the whole, actually that person for the whole time at the Middletown Springs. So it's about creating that other person in the classroom that you have that strong relationship to. So it's a great way. Some of the other things, some of the personalized things that we're doing, technology is a great thing, but it also is not the answer to everything. But there's many ways to use technology to personalize. We use a program which is called MAP, which is Measured Academic Progress. We do that 3 times a year. It's a way of showing progress, and by using that information, we can target those areas that students need to work on. So some of the things, Freckle, Lexia, Dreambox, so the kids know what they need to work on and taking ownership of learning.
And that also gets facilitated through our learner-centered model and our small group work that happens. We also look to do smarter balanced assessments, which is the SBAC value if you have older kids in grades 3 through 6, that's what we call it. We look at Fontes and Pinnell as benchmarks assessments too. We recently at Wells did a data dive looking at our MAP scores and our Fontes and Pinnell scores just yesterday actually, to then change our instruction and meet kids where we're seeing deficits and celebrate what the successes are too. And our teachers are very fluid with going in and observing their peers and getting feedback from each other, in addition to the walkthroughs and observations that Mr. Beal and I do regularly as well. We are continuing our trainings. There's a list of some of the things we're doing there. CPR, pre-K, creative curriculum. We have a foreign language program in both of our schools, and we share a staff member to support that. We have instrumental music lessons in both schools, and we have just recently started to share the collaboration of band practice amongst both of the schools, which will be a more regular thing as we end the school year for our spring performance. And we have school safety teams and grant-funded facility improvements. And something really exciting that is unique to Middletown and Wells is Project Aware, which is advancing wellness and resiliency in education. It's a multiple-year grant that's going to bring mental health services to our communities. It's going to bring outreach programs to our communities. And Mr. Beal and I are working closely with the Director of Special Education, Christine Cam, and Rutland Mental Health, and a plethora of agencies to really bring some more opportunities to our students and families.
And this is really very exciting because we are one of 3 or 2 other
There's
school
3 total,
districts
yeah.
that have this opportunity. So it's a different way of trying to provide services and help support the family and the students. And so we feel very invested that this is really important for us to make sure that this is a success. And
those are the big things that are happening around here. So the last slide just reminds everyone to vote next Tuesday, Super Tuesday. And you can have this direct presentation right on the website, and it's also being aired on Peg TV now. Turn it back over unless there's questions. Thank you very much.
So now we'll take questions, and we're coming to you first, but what happened to the mic? Okay, we're going to move that to whoever's answering, I think. So go ahead, would you like to go first?
I'm going to turn the light back on just so.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Everybody's not like, Thank you.
Oh, yeah, it's nice. Thank you. All right, questions? Well, I was thinking, oh, sure.
I didn't hear what you said.
Well, no, I was trying to decide how to deal with one mic, but go ahead, that will be helpful for us to hear. Okay, if you hold it close to your mouth, I think we heard you.
Susan Stager. Wells. I wondered what 4 minutes is. I spotted that. That's why I asked you if I could ask them. And I remembered it.
Yes, so it's a nature-based program. Actually, Laura Birch on the board has helped kind of facilitate that and get it going. It's 4 sessions where we have kindergarten through 6th grade students working on specific lessons. So this past time they did ecosystems. They went out to the fields. They were tracking animals. They were looking at just what's out there. So the next month in March is a completely different lesson, and there's going to be a culmination at the end of Lake Day so we can add in that flavor of what's going on out there. The kids were very excited.
And this is not provided by the staff?
The staff is involved in it, but it's volunteers that come in and help with this.
Okay,
Did you want to add more to that, Laura?
This is an opportunity too to thank the Modern Woodmen for allowing access to Wells Village School to go out to that outdoor classroom and have our first lesson. Also, Elizabeth Cooper is here from Middletown. She's one of our volunteers. So it was a great success, the first lesson, and we'll be doing a monthly lesson as we continue.
Tomorrow?
Yes.
Can I just make a comment and say, and back me up here, but this,
There you go, Elizabeth.
this was offered as an opportunity. It's grant funded this year, so it was an opportunity for Wells to participate in this program, and hopefully next year they will be able to do it for the full year. But there was grant money available, and so Wells took advantage of that to participate in the program.
Thank you.
All right, other questions?
Is this the time to ask a question about the budget, or is that now, please? Okay.
Right, you ready for this?
Ready.
Yes, we're ready.
Yep.
Thank you. I had a concern about the term professional services, as I started to mention before in the wrong place. It comes up 10 times in the budget, and all in different contexts. I'm sure it means something different every time it comes up. And under professional services, if you add them all up, it comes to just over $40,000. And if you put in purchase services, which is similar, you don't really know what it means, that's almost $100,000. And I'm not talking about the lines about Kelly, because I know Kelly used to be subs. Is that still true?
So purchase services or professional services refers to something where we're paying a vendor or a service or a contractor. And depending on which section you find it in, it could mean something different. So there's a lot of sections where it says Kelly Services After, and that's where we're paying for our subs. And then there's other areas, and it really depends on which part of the budget you're looking at. So for example, in the first page, page 14, there's professional service money there, there's $3,000. That's money for direct instruction to pay a vendor or a service, whether it be an evaluation for a student, whether it be to pay an organization, for example, like Four Winds, to come in and do services with the students. But it's just money available to pay a organization, a vendor, a contractor to come in and do services. And it could be an array of different services depending on which category. If it was under repairs, it would be for somebody to come in and do repair services. If it's under athletics, it's usually for refs or officials, whatever you want. It means something different in each section of the budget, and it's just a general term we use. The term purchase services are services that we're purchasing from the SU. So in the packet on page 24, you'll see there's a list of staff that are contracted by the SU, but that work in Wells and Middletown Springs schools. And so a portion of those salaries for those staff may be funded by the SU, whether it be special ed or through a grant, but there's usually a portion that's not funded through that special ed or a grant that has to come back to the local district as a charge. So for example, special ed paras, there's a portion of each special ed para's time that doesn't qualify for special ed funding. So that portion of their time gets billed back to the local district as a purchase service. So those purchase service lines you see, and I think there's probably two of them in here, one under Middletown, one under Wells. Those are for those services for staff that are contracted by the SU, and a portion of that that's being billed back to the local district.
Okay, I think my concern is more an issue of transparency than actual dollars. I'm concerned that maybe you're required by law to use the term professional services. Maybe that's the way it's just set up. I don't know, but that means nothing to an ordinary person. It doesn't tell us how the money is getting spent. And I don't know, if you have to use that term, maybe it would be appropriate to have a page in the report that explains where the dollars actually went and what you are paying for when it comes to professional services. A chart, I think, could be drawn up showing the dollars and cents and just explaining what each of those meant in that particular context, in that particular year. So you just know where your dollars are going.
Well, I mean, my comment, so the term professional service is a chart of accounts term that's designated by the state of Vermont in the chart of accounts. So I mean, that term is something to use, and we're really limited to like 15 characters. So we can't put too much detail on that line. And you could have one professional service line that's getting used to pay 10, 15 different vendors. And so really it's a catch-all for anything that may fall into that category. And in terms of perspective, I think you just mentioned $40,000 in a $5 million budget. So it's not a significant piece of the budget where we could spend the time to outline it in the budget. Because we're really limited. We don't want to have unnecessary accounts in here.
Okay, so
as far as a page with the details, I mean, we have hundreds of vendors that we pay, and all of our books are always open to the record, open to the public to find out. But every time we have more information in here, it's a cost that we have to pay, it's the cost to produce it, it's the cost to prepare it. So, I mean, to list all of the vendors that we pay, that's something that the board, if the board is something they want to agree to, but we have hundreds of vendors that we pay on a monthly, annual basis, to list them all here.
maybe
Be restricted.
every vendor, what is what they did, what the money went for. I'm not suggesting it be put in the budget itself, because I understand there is a format, and you are required to follow that. but there's a lot of charts in here, and there's letters in here, and a page along those lines would be very enlightening. That was all I was suggesting.
Your comments noted, and I'll see what I can do for next year to enhance the report.
Thank you.
Well, I think along those lines, when you're projecting those budgeted costs, are you taking an amount that you had from last year and putting a percentage over on it? I mean, how are you building this budget from the ground up? Or are you going off of last year plus 5%, 12%? How are you coming up with these numbers?
For the most part, we're looking at what happened the year before, looking at that activity, see if there's any extenuating circumstances that may have caused that number to be inflated or deflated from the prior year. And if that line was sufficiently funded based on the prior year, we'll usually leave it flat. If we need to make cuts and there's room to make cuts in that line, and that doesn't just go for those professional services lines, it goes for all lines. So we'll look at the year before, see if it was properly funded, and we'll cut as appropriate. If there's, a lot of times staffing makes up a large percentage of our budget and tuition, and if we need to find savings, nickel and diming all these little lines doesn't really amount to much. And to have too tight of a budget sometimes can hurt us in the long run. If we're cutting every line to the penny to try to figure out what we're going to spend, and then something happens that we didn't plan on, then we're ending up over budget. And so what we look at years prior, we look at the current year, what's happening, we're budgeting for next year, halfway through this year, so we know what's happened this year, we know what's happened last year, and we're taking that all into account to try to come up with our best guess estimate.
Just to add to that, Lewis spends a lot of time with us as the principals going over the budget and looking at what we spent last year. We have cut back things, off the top of my head, I can't think of it, but we do look at, all right, what do we need? So we have like 2 or 3 rounds with Lewis to have the discussions about budget. So
It's a collaborative effort.
yeah, it is. So kudos to Lewis and his skills in trying to develop this budget.
My name is Amanda, and I'm a Wells resident, and I just have a question in regards to the chart that you showed. You said about a third of the budget is towards wages, and there was about $18,000 that was spent per student. For example, my child is one of 29 students in a combined class of 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. So with that $18,000, that's $522,000 with those 29 students, where I feel we probably could afford for each of our students to have their own teacher. And I'm not sure that the fact that there's only 6 kids in the 4th grade is really the fault of any of the 5th or 6th graders to have to share in their learning when there's definitely money in the budget for them to, I think, maybe have that readdressed. Is there any discussion into this budget next year with supplying our children with their own teacher?
I'll say something, then I'll let the principals talk to that directly. So, yes, the per pupil spending is approximately $80,000 as I showed. And the thing that you also need to remember is on top of all of your classroom teachers, there's a lot of ancillary staff that are having contact with your students on a daily basis that on top of the classroom teacher. So there's the art teacher, there's the music teacher, PE teacher, there's the counselor, the librarian, there's math interventionists, reading interventionists, there's the food service. So there's a lot of pieces that are on top of your classroom teacher that are added to the budget, that are added to that expense. I'm sorry, you said you were Wells?
Yeah. So I guess to speak to is there any consideration of an additional support staff? Is that the question you're looking for?
I guess I'm not even looking for additional support. I'm just looking for my child, and not even just my child, but all of the children. 4th graders should meet their 4th grade standards, and 5th graders should meet their 5th grade standards, and same with 6th. And I'm just really concerned about the, I guess, preparedness of our children when they leave and enter 6th grade, if they're sharing a classroom with 4th graders. I know there's been some concerns in my own house, and I think others, I can't speak for everybody else, but I just feel that if we have the money in the budget and we're increasing the budget, then maybe, so what if those 6 kids have one teacher for a year? It's maybe time for our kids to have one teacher too.
So I don't have a, I mean, I don't want to get into specifics for next year because we're still living in this year, but I appreciate the comment for sure. In regards to, you know, having their own classroom, I can speak to how those 2 teachers, for everyone else, I know you guys are very familiar with how the kids' day looks like, but the 29 students that she's speaking to, you know, the 35 that are down there, they're not all in one room at one time, and there's multiple adults that are in there, and that's part of this learner-centered model that's going on down there. So yes, they are responsible for the 4th grade standards if they're a 4th grader, 5th grader, and 6th, and so on. They're also being exposed to the standards that are above them if they're 4th grade, 5th grade, and so on. And that's really a benefit of our staff and knowing that the standards exist for all of those students in that combined classroom of 4 or 5, and then when they mix and they go, you know, to the 6th grade teacher, which is sometimes a 4, 5, 6 math or a 5, 6 math or whatever. So I'd like to say that the staff does a really nice job trying to meet that, but I sincerely understand what you're saying, and I'll note that as far as next year.
I just think $522,000 for 29 kids, they're entitled to their.
Did everyone hear what her comment?
I can't hear you. That's all.
It's okay, I'll hand it back. I don't want to take it, but that would be nice.
Sorry.
No, you're okay.
I was just saying, if there's $522,000 within those 29 students, us as taxpayers, and more importantly, us as parents and our children, for that matter, are entitled to the preparedness for 7th grade. And if that means that, so what? We pay for 6 kids to have one teacher, and we pay for 6 kids to have one teacher, but I think if we're looking at a budget that's almost $6 million, our kids should really be entitled to what is right and what every other school is, not every other school, but what most other schools are doing. And I guess that kind of wraps up with, you know, our test scores. If we look at our test scores, is this combination really working? Is it really worth saving the money, or are we maybe just not meeting the needs? I don't know. I just think if the money's there, it should be spent maybe for a teacher.
Other questions or comments?
Mary Pratt from Wells. Because don't currently have kids in school, how many teachers are currently at the Wells School?
I have 7 classroom teachers, pre-K through 6.
So is that a change from 2 years ago, 1 year ago?
2 years ago.
So minus 1.
Yes.
Did that become a result of the fact that we're now paying for school choice in the secondary schools?
Attrition. It would be attrition.
And the second follow-up question is just what are we currently paying for secondary students in Granville, Holding, Mill River, Long Trail, and what is in the budget for 2021?
So for school choice, we pay for out-of-state schools, we pay up to the state average. So for Granville, that their tuition falls pretty significantly below that state average. It's approximately $9,000 to retain $1 at this point. And then for Vermont schools, if they're public schools, we pay their announced rate. And if they're private schools, we would pay the state average. Most of the students for Wells Springs go to either Granville or they would go to Corey Valley schools or Mill River. Corey Valley's secondary tuition is $17,000. And Mill River, I don't have the exact number, but it's pretty close to that.
What was the change from 20?
Before the merger?
No, like, obviously there's always an increase.
So Corey Valley's tuition actually stayed constant from last year. It was $17,000 last year, $17,000 next year. Granville usually increases by a couple $100, pretty small. And then again, I don't remember Miller offhand, but it should be a small percentage increase. Usually we budget at the time if we're doing the budget. We don't know. We usually budget 2 to 3% increases each year for secondary tuition.
And this budget amount, correct me if I'm wrong, Louis, is accounting for about $1.8 million in secondary tuition. Is that, are you looking for a total number?
No, I was just wanting
Okay.
to know what the change
Comparison.
year over year for each of the schools.
And I think also Louis mentioned that more students are coming into 7th grade than leaving as seniors. So it's more students going into secondary education.
The secondary tuition is on page 19. It's $1.8 million for next year. Of that, a majority of it is for in-state tuition, which would be schools like Pulteney, Mill River, and then there's $200,000 for out-of-state, Granville, and then private school tuition, which would be in-state, usually Swamp Trail, Burn, schools like that, is $295,000. And that's on page 19.
And that's changing too, there's one big difference that's private schools are not accepting full tuition rate after 2021.
So the in-state,
Can you repeat the question? We couldn't hear that.
it was a comment, so currently we pay up to the state average, which is about $50,000 and change. I do have all the amounts in my binder, I don't have them on hand. But, and if you look at the tuition for, say, Long Trail and Burn, it's usually greater than that, $15,000. I think in the past, they've worked individually with parents to waive that cost, but your comment was it's no longer going to happen.
Yeah, as of 2021, there'll be like a $12,000 difference. It's like $6,000 for transportation and a little over $5,700 for the in-school tuition. That won't be covered even though we have school choice because they're no longer accepting the amount that we pay as a ticket.
And as far as the way that works is, and how much we pay, that's a standard in statute around the state. For any public school that's for a student that has choices going to a private school, it would be that state average amount that we would pay. And we don't provide transportation.
It's really the same as before.
Okay, other questions and comments?
Wells. I have a question on the budget. I'm wondering if why the salaries of the principals for Wells and Middletown different. Why they're not getting the same. And it looks like and they have less students. So
I probably can answer that, unless you want to.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Liz Pulte this is her first year as principal, and Rick, what are you in, year 8? Ninth year. So a lot of it is just experience.
Is that for plant operations? And I mean, if you just go down the list, you see multiple times Middletown is higher than Wells on multiple things with regards to salaries.
So just the way salaries work, we have union salaries for all our professional staff, except for our principals, they're non-union, and I just explained that one. So if they're union teachers or whatever, it's based on their education, their experience, and we have a salary schedule that we need to follow. That goes also for our support staff, and our support staff is para-educators. It can include administrative assistants, custodians, things like that. And that's negotiated by the board, and we have to follow that. So if you see differences, it's generally they were there longer, and it could be experience. You know, like one teacher has their master's degree, and another one just got out of college. Okay? Thank you.
I'll offset, so the individual salaries aren't listed in here for the Wells and Middletown. So when you're looking at the salaries for the function or the category, say for principal's office or any of those offices, it's not just the principal, it's the whole office. So it could be the secretary. So there could be, depending on the category you're looking at in the school, there could be a different amount of staff, different hours, different days. So it's not just salaries that you're looking at in these lines, because they are a gross amount. It's not individual salaries.
One thing I did want to add is I know the board has been really conscientious about looking at equity and making sure that everything is fair between the schools. Everything, salary, opportunity. That is one thing they've really been very focused on for the last few years.
Any other questions or comments?
I think one general comment I'd like to make about the budget, we have with the new supervisory union, we have a unified labor agreement for the teachers that was negotiated last year that we're under. And if you go back to the pie chart that Louis showed us, salaries and benefits are a big piece of the thing that we're tied into contractually. We negotiate as hard as we can to represent our interests, but with some of the increases in salary that came last year that are reflected in this budget, that they're there. And then on top of it, what Louis pointed out to us, the 12% increase in health care, just some rough averages that the people should be aware of. If you just take the average salary of teachers for us, and I don't remember the number, and it's not that important, but there's an average, and they pay for 80% of their, we pay for 80% of their health insurance on family plan. So 80% of the premium for a family plan is some number of dollars. I don't remember the number off the top of my head. And if you take that figure and apply it to the average salary, on average, the teachers, the cost of employing a teacher went up 3.9% for us, just in insurance. Say nothing about any step increase or annual increase or anything else in the contractual agreement. Pretty close to 4% raise before they even start. Now, granted, the 20% that they pay, the teachers are getting less because they're having to pay that too. It's the 12% just doesn't affect us. But as far as taxpayers to raise money to pay people, it went up pretty close to 4% just with the insurance cost. That's kind of what we're stuck with. You know, you don't see that as a raise, but it's a raise in the cost to us that if we're going to do it, and that's where some of the secondary costs that are billed back to us, because that same 12% is affecting them just like it's affecting us. And so it comes back, and so then it gets down to, do you cut the elementary program because secondary costs went up? We've tried to avoid that because it's very important that our local schools don't get penalized for something that happens beyond our control. But what happens is the bill gets sent to the taxpayers. And we hope you can approve it, but we don't like what we have to present to you this year, but that's the facts of the matter. Anyone else on the board want to comment on the budget before we go any further?
I would make some feel-good comments. Try to get this better this time. It was noted at one of our recent board meetings that all of the accomplishments of this merger have been completed without any acrimony, and that makes me the most proud of our staff, of our principal, our new principal. Everybody's on the ground working. We have a returned superintendent who's coming out of retirement and working, to keep us going. And it's a small thing, I'm sure, you can look past it, but those things matter. And the kids see those things in their schools. These small schools do matter.
Right, other comments, questions?
I was just noticing in here, I don't know if it's something that's included under professional services or where it would be. But one thing that I've noticed is that there's nothing in the budget about food services and meals and things like that. So where is that? Where's where is it, what we're paying for food services for the children and for people who are staffing the kitchen, things like that?
You want to handle that, Louis?
Yeah, it's on page 20. It's not, looking at this, it's not clearly identified on here, but it's page 20 says fund transfer out to reserve. So we're required to manage a separate fund for food services called an enterprise fund. So we have to maintain that separately outside the general fund. And so anything that the food service fund doesn't cover, so we're collecting revenue from the state, we're collecting revenue from parents, and then we're paying the expense of managing the program. Whatever the net cost is, that gets transferred from the general fund to this reserve enterprise fund. So it's listed as $70,000. So that's the taxpayer cost to run the food service program on top of anything that we're receiving from parents paying for their meals, as well as state and federal reimbursements for meals. And that's the cost for a small school food service program, as well as a high quality program that we have.
I guess another question would be, you mentioned that you're running the farm to school program, and like this program, Four Winds, which is a program that's offered through a separate organization. It's Four Winds Nature Institute. So where is the funding, or where is the money coming from or going for things like that, so which are sort of the extras?
So each school has, that goes back to the professional service line, so each school has a pot of money that they have for things such as that. So for like Middletown, for example, under direct instruction, on page 14, they have $3,000 budget for professional services and $2,000 for professional services enrichment. So those lines where they would pull funds to fund something like, say, a Four Winds, or whether they wanted to go to have somebody else come in, if they want to have Vince come in and do a presentation, they would pull from those lines. And Wells would have similar lines on their budget, so they would be on starts on page 16, so they have $2,000 for professional services and $3,500 for enrichment. So a total of $5,500.
So Middletown Springs, I think Wells, you actually got a grant. We had a grant years ago. We're still finishing up the rest of the money. What I love about Middletown Springs is we have great volunteers. Elizabeth was one of our great volunteers that got the farm garden going, and great volunteers that keep it going, who come in and work with the kids, work with the teachers. So, and then if we need things, I tend to find money in the budget where I can, so to cover it.
Other questions or comments? Anybody?
What is the total number of teachers with both schools that are paid? Of just classroom teachers?
12 or 13.
Yeah,
Do classroom teachers, Taylor?
So for Middletown Springs, so I have 5.5. That's I'm just counting here.
Page 9. Page 9.
Take a second here. So
So page 9 of the report shows for both Wells and Middletown, the number of students per class as well as the number of teachers to come up with a teacher-student ratio. And then it lists at the bottom any ancillary staff, so other teaching staff, which would be your art teacher, music teacher, PE teacher, interventionist, and then other non-teaching staff, which would be your paraeducators, your office staff, custodians, principal, anyone other than someone who's doing direct instruction.
No, that's clearer than I probably was going to say, so.
Did that answer your question? Yes. Any other questions or comments? All right, going once, going twice. Anything else? All right, so hearing none, moving on to Article 6, which is to transact any other lawful business that comes before the meeting. Any other lawful business? All right, so hearing none, we will adjourn shortly and reconvene on March 3rd, which means that on March 3rd you go to your polling place and vote by Australian ballot Articles 7 and 8, which are electing the school directors and the budget. And so you'll do that in your own town. In Middletown, it's from 7 to 7. At the Historical Society in Wells, it's the town hall from 8 to 7. And if there's nothing else, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Congratulations. Did I take it back?
No, that's good. I don't need.